So today we are here with Lasina Jensen. Lasina is our senior client success manager. Her and I geek out on this all the time, right? Control the conversions. We had talked about last week on controlling the crowd. So you're talking to the right people, right? But even when you got the right people, how do you make sure that they go from being a passive listener to an active visitor and engaged lead? So, Lasina, welcome. And I'm just going to do the open-ended question. When you say control the conversions, what does that mean to you?
Well, to me, that means having a process and a system to move people to take action, and then being able to know where that activity, was initiated from, where it came from.
Yeah, because I agree with you on that. And it's funny, I see so many people say, well, I was on lots of interviews and I had some great conversations. And, even if they were the right people, but it didn't do anything. And it's like, well, what was your goal, right? The idea of if I just have a great conversation, that everybody will just come running to me. It doesn't make sense. It's almost like going fishing. I was there. I knew the fish were right underneath me, but I didn't have the right bait. I didn't have the line. I was just making noise, and it didn't work. So let's, maybe start with the end in mind. So where do you start with on controlling the conversions? You're on a podcast. You're in front of the right audience. What should you be thinking about with controlling the conversions?
Well, you should, beginning with the end in mind. What do you ultimately want people to do? And that does look different for every person that we talk with, that we work with. Some they know in advance that they would like people to buy a copy of their book, and hopefully at some point the right person will read it and hire them as a speaker or bring them in as a consultant. And so that's just one example, one of many. Yeah. So just really knowing, what do you want people to do? And it's not always going to be someone hears you on a podcast and they're instantly going to reach out and say, let's work together as a speaker, or can we hire you as a speaker, as a consultant? You also want to understand, what path are you taking them on to build that trust and authority with them? Because that could be the first time that person or that audience is hearing from you. You've been in obscurity. A lot of the times we work with people people don't know who they are. So you need to give them something to build up the trust and authority, to bring them into your orbit, your world, so that it does drive eventually someone taking the big action that you want someone to take.
Yeah. And it's like that, what you said, they're starting with the end in mind. I think that came from
Stephen Covey.
Stephen Covey, the habits of highly successful people.
Correct.
And when I hear people say, well, I didn't get the success that I was expecting, it's like, well, what did you do to get there? Or did the host know what you were expecting? Right. I can think of, over the last 9 years, talking to different people that come to us and they're like, yeah, I was on podcast interviews and to promote my book, and the host never even asked me about my book. And I'm like, well, did you mention it? Right? Did you bring it up beforehand? Well, I sent them an email. Well, life is busy. You don't know that the host is going to do that every time. Or, I want to use this to grow my speaking business. Did you ever say in the entire podcast that you were a speaker or that you like to do speaking? And one of the things that I know the team teaches in the walkthrough interviews, right? Every client knows their content, but we give them a walkthrough interview to show them the notifications, the resources, all the best practices. And one of the things that they teach, which is so powerful, is before they hit record, right? To ask the host, Lasina, I'm thrilled to be here on the podcast. What are you hoping to get out of this as a host? And, where do you want to go with this? What can I do to make you look like a genius for inviting me? And it's funny because the host will tell you, right? This is what I want to talk about. I want to go deep here. This is my audience. And then most people are nice. They're going to come back and ask the same question, like, well, what are you hoping to get out of that? And that's a great time to go, well, I want to talk about, the new product I have, the new offering I have. I want to talk about the new book, right? Whatever it is. And they're like, oh, definitely, we'll get to that. Or the other thing there too, and we'll get into this later, the welcome page, right? Always sending people to one place. Tell them about it at that point, because sometimes they will mention it before you do. So all of those things are important. Now, the other one that I want to hear you rant on this one.
Uh-oh.
This idea of, if I just come up and talk about anything, right? Just that will work, right? That will convert. Versus, here's the topic I'm talking about today. Here's why my expertise is. Can you talk about the importance of, what you talk about and how it supports your goals?
Well, I mean, it would be terrible if we went to a TED Talk and the person just showed up and just riffed on some random thing, right? What makes a TED Talk interesting to listen to? They're prepared. They know the message that they want to, and I'm just picking on TED Talk because it's so widely known. I would feel very ripped off as an audience member going to a TED Talk, a name that's trusted in, the public speaking world, and someone's just riffing on random stuff and they don't have a process, or there isn't anything that's driving interest or engagement or excitement. It's just talking and hoping something comes from it, right? And you kind of already teed this up before in your prior comments of, it really does start with, what are you doing as a guest or if you're speaking on a public stage, are you intentionally communicating what you want to the people involved, right? Are you involved? Or are you just showing up thinking, well, if I just talk on this podcast where the host has 20,000 followers or whatever the case may be, someone's going to reach out. It's just going to spread like wildfire. And we know from all of our data and our experience that is just not the case. And so I would feel ripped off if I went to a podcast host audience that I trust and that's the experience I got. I would self-select to not be there. Right.
I think of our previous guest that we had, Dr. Adrian McIntyre, where he talked about the art of the anecdote. And as he was explaining that, I'm like, oh, that is so true, right? When people come up there and they just start talking, you don't know where they're going. It's not interesting. It's not tied to a point, or at least you can't see it's tied to a point. And then at the end, they don't wrap it up and tell you the meaning and what you heard. And it was just like, well, that was an interesting story. I don't know how it applies, but it's I guess it was entertaining. And so, yeah, it's like, why are you telling this story? Why are you focused on this? Does this support your goal on there?
And I agree. And I, with the many different people that we talk with, you can tell who has a strong and powerful message, who's really dialed in, who's focused, who knows that the only thing they're missing is a platform and time and opportunity to explain it and differentiate themselves. And then, if you just want to talk to everyone about your random ideas, it's just, you're not even, like you said, going back to fishing, you're not really fishing. You're just having a nice time talking about your ideas.
Yeah.
So.
And while I'll often say you're one conversation away, it's got to be a meaningful conversation and get to the point. And it's another interview we did, Jeff Barch, where he talks about how do you answer that first question, and once again, the team in the walkthrough calls always talks about who are you, why are you here, and why should people listen to you, right?
Right.
And I used to be awful at this. People would ask me, and I grew up here, I went to school here, I live here, here are my hobbies, here's where I live. Nobody cares about that. It's the what's in it for me. So trying to get that. Who are you? Why are you there? And why should people listen to you?
Exactly. And it's really just better for your credibility with your business and your brand and your name. It also makes the host look good as well. And then we work with the hosts and the guests. And then we win when there's that win-win situation where everybody is intentionally involved to reach a certain outcome together. And we're all playing our part to make it happen. And it's like an orchestra, right? You need to have those different instruments and you need to have the different melodies and all of that. And when you take away one of those, in many cases, it's not going to sound good. So it's the same idea.
That's an interesting analogy. And I'm probably not as musical, but it's like, yeah, there's got to be a beginning, middle, and end. Mm-hmm. And I want to spend some time on the end because sometimes I'll hear people and they've got a great message. They've got a great story. And it's like, what's the next step? And it's like they end it in the middle and just say, thank you, Lasina. And it's like, oh, you just missed the opportunity there to help people become customers, become clients. Can you talk a little bit about how you wrap up a podcast? What's the best way to just move them from being a passive listener to an active visitor to an engaged lead?
So as for me, I'm just going to use just me as an everyday, consumer. I love learning and all of that. When something wraps up that's very powerful to me, guess what I'm doing? I'm thinking about it. I'm doing some research. I'm looking up more on this. If it's tied to a specific person or organization, I'm on their website. I'm looking for answers and solutions, right? So, and I think I'm not the only one. That's a lot of us. That's most of us. And so if it is done well and it's powerful and it leaves that imprint, right, in your mind, you're going to take action. You've been sort of told in one way or another, and everyone has different ways of communicating that, of what are the next steps.
So what's the what's the data say that works best, right? As you get the end of a podcast interview, what do you give them as calls to actions? Where do you send them?
Right.
Should I send them to my TikTok, my Twitter, or give them my cell phone?
Well, I wouldn't give people your cell phone number.
I don't.
You might get some spammers, scammers, right? But in all seriousness and, and honesty there, telling people to go to a specific place. And what works very well and has been tested for, almost the last decade, and where we've seen it work, is having a specific contained place just for that interview. It does a couple of things, right? First, it makes the audience feel special. Like, oh, they created this special page just for us, the listeners of this podcast, of the hosts that I trust, right? And then the other thing is telling them where to go gives them a clear call to action. So they're not like a lot of us out there, like, I love what I just heard. I love all of that. But now I'm here researching and I'm there. I'm trying to find their website. I'm trying to find who they are, looking for them on LinkedIn. We don't have that attention span for that kind of research anymore. And so I believe that as well-intentioned as people are, just they don't really always are not always aware of it. They're actually sending people in a rabbit hole somewhere and losing them in the rabbit hole, and they're being forgotten about pretty quickly. So when you tell people, the host says, Tom, where can people learn more about you, right? This is your opportunity to tell them exactly where to go, what to do, or what they're going to find when they get there, and how they can take action.
And just make it easy for the people, right? And
Right.
I was just thinking, if you're on a podcast and you say, oh, just, I'm on social media, just follow me at Lasina Jensen. Well, how many people are going to spell Lasina with a C instead of an S? And is it Jensen or Jensen? And if you confuse, it's just going to get bad. They'll get frustrated. Mm-hmm. So, what we always teach is send them to that one page. And don't send them to your homepage. And you mentioned this because your homepage is going to change over time, right? This is evergreen traffic. It should go to an evergreen page, right? So here we are in 2024, and I say, oh, just come back here. There's an assessment or a new report we just put out. Somebody hears this 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and they go there and they don't see it, it's going to lose credibility. So,
right.
What we have tested is always send them to one page. We call it a welcome page. So it's got navigation on it, header, footer. But have that. I like how you said, make them feel special. It's like, yeah, don't come to the front door. Your friends and family. Just come to the side door, right? I was on a podcast recently with Don Monkhouse over in England, right? And we were talking about this, and it's like, oh, yeah, just come to this page. I'm not going to give out the address here because it'll throw off the analytics. Because I also know anyone that hits that page came from Dom's podcast. And so when people say, well, you can't attribute traffic from a podcast, that's how you do it. Now, it's not perfect. Some people may still go to the homepage, but it's the best way to attribute. You also mentioned,
absolutely is, yeah.
Yeah, you also mentioned about what they're going to find there. What offers have you seen, over the years that actually move people?
So I'm just going to go back to how we do it, having a 3 offers: a small yes, a medium yes, and a heck yes. And that's how we tell our clients and consult with them on how you want to, the kinds of offerings you want to have. Just really that small yes is something to bring them into your world. It's really a quick win for those who are still just they still just want to learn more. They're not ready to take any big massive action, but they're intrigued, right? And, that is going to look different for everyone. Some people, that small yes is a podcast that they may already have. It could be, it could be like a checklist or a graphic, just something very simple to start engaging with them and giving them some value, of course, too. And then that medium yes could be buying a copy of a book that someone may have, or downloading a free chapter, or looking at an in-depth case study or research report, just depending on the type of guest, because now those people are a little more invested. They're kind of going, you know what, there really is something here, but I need to spend a little bit more time. Some of our clients, they put in a library of all the past podcast interviews. So this allows people to go, oh, they're over here now, and they're there, and they can binge a little bit on who they are and really get familiar. And always being able to, again, that heck yes, right? It's your wording, but I love it. They're ready to talk to the wizard after that interview, after binging maybe on other interviews. Make it easy for them to schedule a call with you or your team, whatever that big yes is, or reach out and book a speaking engagement, whatever people are promoting. And then that's giving people 3 ways to take action. And we talked with a recent new client we have coming on, and he had said there's like a psychology to, for people to have agency, to be able to choose, I like this, and this is where I'm at right now, wherever that is, rather than just giving them one call to action. There's no choice there. And so that kind of I hear this all the time. I have this lead magnet. It's really great, but nobody's been downloading it, or no one's been taking it after the podcast interview. And we already know, psychology tells us that's because you're not giving them choice.
And also, it's like remembering who your client is. And just because somebody said on Facebook that this is the best way to do it, does that apply to your client? And I can think of, like, we have some people that come to us and I say, well, for my small yes, I'm going to tell them they can come back and sign up for my newsletter. And it's just like, wow, I've never seen that call work in the last decade, right? Does anybody really want another newsletter? Especially when I don't even know what it is. Just sign up for a newsletter. No, at least tell me what it is, right? If it's something that's interesting there. Other people will come back and say, well, I'm going to sell my book. Well, that's great. I mean, selling the book off a medium yes can be a great way to do it. For other people, it's just give your book away, right? And I get confused sometimes with people where it's like, for me, if you want a copy of my book, you can go there, you can get it. And because at the end of the day, my business model is not making $2 off of every book. It's it's showing people that we have the expertise in this so that they can either learn how to do it themselves or see there's a lot to this. I'm just going to hire the people that wrote the book on it. And so I see some people that are, working 5-figure, 6-figure engagements, and they'll say, well, I'll give away the first chapter of my book. Really?
Give away the book.
Give away the book, right? And it's
Mail
like,
it to them.
Yeah. And I think of Craig Cody was an example of that, right? When he mailed it to him, now he's got their mailing address, right? And he's going to put some other brochures in there and everything. And will they read all of it? I don't know, but there's a wow factor to it, right? If you're going after big fish and whales, right? Somebody that's going to give you a 6-figure contract, do you really think they're going to pull out their credit card to buy your Tripwire product so they can be nurtured for 6 months before they actually, click on something and sign up for 6 figures? No, it's probably not going to happen that way.
Yeah. And you make a really good point on that. Like, that's why I was sort of giving a little bit of a disclaimer. It really depends on what are you offering? What's the big outcome you want? Who is your target audience? What is the engagement like? And so that's where the crafting of those offers needs to be very strategic and in line with what your outcome is. And to be logical and to make sense. Like you said, a 6-figure potential consulting client, you need to give them a lot of value because they really need to trust you before they spend 6 or 7 figures on you.
Yeah. I can think of somebody that came to us and said, can you target Fortune 500 CEOs? And I said, of course, but there's not a podcast called the Fortune 500 CEO podcast with 500 downloads per month or per episode. It's really, at that point, you need to get the people, talk to the people that influence them. So at that point, putting, a discovery call maybe doesn't make sense. Definitely putting a product doesn't make sense, but make sure that you have stuff that they could share with the decision maker, right? That's right. Sometimes that small yes, that checklist, that assessment can be so powerful because it's got your branding on it too. So when they forward it on or when they print it out, people remember where that came from.
Yeah, and one of our clients said that with every single, and I did an interview with him last year, that every way that people could take action, there was a place where they were able to book a call. So if they ended up back on that page again, right, they can book a call, on that specific page. And it's very smart you're engaging with them a certain way, but also providing value, right? You don't want to just randomly put stuff there. Like it does need to be strategic, but it also needs to provide value. For certain, like for a 6-figure, and we're just going to pick on that because it's so polarizing, right? But for a 6-figure, 7-figure consulting client, I don't know that they're going to do a checklist. Do they have time for that? Or who's doing the checklist? Who is the decision maker doing the checklist? Is the lower level, and I don't say that to be, to downplay it all, but is a lower level employee doing the checklist? I mean, that's where you want to make sure that the offers provide value and they match the audience.
Sometimes that checklist, if you will, can even be the point of framing the conversation. And I've seen this before where somebody will say, here's the 10 things to look in a partner for a marketing agency, right? It starts to frame those. Or is
Good
your blank working the way it should be? I first saw this early on. Ted Lowe is a men's marriage counselor, and we worked with him years ago, and he had this checklist, and it was great. It was like 10 questions, to rank yourself as a husband. And I loved how he said, if you think you're a 9 out of 10, we've got nothing to talk about. But if I can ask you questions and you're like, oh, I'm a 7 out of 10, and then you give that to your spouse and they're like, I'm a 4 out of 10. Now we definitely have something to talk about. And it's the same way. I might think, oh yeah, I guess my, accounting firm, my professional service provider, whatever it is, I guess they're good. I guess they're a 9 out of 10. But if all of a sudden somebody invites me to take this assessment, and you don't even have to maybe put the answers in there, right, to capture all of that. But if I'm like, oh, yeah, they don't do that. Oh, we haven't updated that in ages. Now there's a reason to talk to there. And once again, it's not holding off everything in the interview that you got to go to the website behind the list to get it. But these are things that people are takeaways if they're interested in the interview.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So again, it just goes back to don't just throw your calls to action together and not put any thought into it, right? Anyone can make a checklist. Anyone can go on ChatGPT and make a checklist. Maybe you can use it for a little bit of guidance and inspiration as a tool, but you shouldn't rely on stuff like that. You really want to make sure that, is it driving that thought pattern of, do we really need this outside solution? Do we really need help from an outside solution, or are we doing fine? So,
and speaking of a resource, I always share this one so that people can see what a welcome page looks like.
Right.
I had the honor of being on Jamie Masters' podcast, Eventual Millionaire, like 5 or 6 years ago. I still get clients from it, but this is the one that I always use. So if you go to interviewvalet.com/EM for Eventual Millionaire, you can see what a welcome page is there. You can see, the hero image of the podcast. You see, the host name, the host pronouns, the 3 offers on the bottom. It's not magic. It's just something that we have tested over and over.
Exactly. Right. And, it is definitely going to transform the outcome of the interviews. We know the clients that are using them and taking our consulting and coaching on how to be more to optimize that process, to be more effective, and taking that and implementing it into their interviews. And it's just second nature to them now. And they are seeing the results. They're able to attribute, and they are able to measure. They're able to see, was that a home run interview or was that a base hit?
Yeah. And the final thing I want to share is an example, right? People always like, well, how do you do it without sounding salesy? Right? How to do that? I don't want to sound salesy, and I go back to what my rabbi taught me, and I am not Jewish, but I have a rabbi. I think everybody should. Rabbi Daniel Lapin talks about, if you believe that you can help someone, and you don't help them to take that next step, you're actually harming them. Right. So if you believe that you're on that podcast and you can help people, and if you don't, you shouldn't be on the podcast, make it easy for them to go to that next place. Make sure that they understand why they're going there. So Lasina, can we do some role playing here? You're the host. I'll be the guest. You tee it up, and I'll try to do it the right way.
All right. I will. Tom, this is a great interview today. Can you tell people where can they learn more about you? How do they find you?
Well, thank you, Lasina. I'm so thankful for being here. And, if any of this resonated with you, we've got a few ways that we can help you. Just go to interviewvalet.com/EM. And on there, you're going to find a few things, right? There's a assessment, 10 questions. Will podcast interview marketing work for me? You can get your answer right there. Now, you mentioned the book, Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business with a Targeted Interview Strategy. You can buy it on Amazon. If you want a free copy, you can just go there. If you're in the United States, I'll mail you a copy. If you're overseas, I'll email you a copy. And then the third way, if you're like, wow, this is interesting. I'd like to talk with someone to see how I could use this in my business. Well, I'll put my calendar scheduling link on there. We can find a time to talk about this. So all three of those things will be back at interviewvalet.com/EM. So that's how you do it. Tell them where to go, tell them what they'll find there, and then remind them again where to go. Once again, it's not magic. It's not a secret. It's just something we have tested over and over, and it works the best.
Right. And I love how I know that you've got a lot of at-bats with that, Tom. I think it's so important, the pace at which you delivered that and just how clear you were. Just because the delivery is just as important as anything else, right? If you just rattle it off quickly, you mumble, you feel you're not confident about it, well, people will miss it because often they're listening while they're driving, they're going for a run, maybe on the subway or whatever they're doing. And, you're going to make yourself forgettable just even in your delivery. So,
well, I can't say that I started out that way, right? We learned so much from our clients. What's ordinary to them is amazing to us. And I remember early on, the studies say that 70% of podcasts are listened to sped up. And a dear friend of mine said, why did you call the company Interview Ballet? And I'm like, no, it's valet with a V. I said, Interview Ballet? That's stupid. And he's like, yeah, I thought so too. But you say it so dang quick. That's what I heard. And so I've got to do that, right? So to slow down, Interview Valet with a V, right? Because just remember, people are multitasking. They've got it sped up. So make it easy for them to remember your name there. Make it easy for them to take those next steps, because at the end of a podcast interview, right, they've either turned you up or turned you off. They have self-selected. That's why when they come from a podcast interview, they convert 25 times better than blogs. They close faster for initial engagement that's higher. They churn less. But you want to make sure that you make it easy for them to get to you.
Exactly. And you have that one chance in most cases with that host, that targeted audience that we work so hard to get you in front of, or even if you're out there doing this for yourself, you're there. So that's how you got to make the most of it. You have to maximize every minute, every listener. And that is one of the best ways to make that appearance count.
Well, Lasina, so last week we talked about controlling the crowd. Make sure you're talking to the right people. Right. This week you learned how to control the conversions, to maximize the impact for people from going to a passive listener, to an active visitor, to an engaged lead. So if you do those two things, control the crowd, control the conversions, you will maximize the impact of every person that hears your interview. Next week, I'm going to be sitting down with Tiffany Mink. She's our marketing manager, and we're going to be talking about how you can control the conversations. So how can you take this interview and repurpose it so that you are dominating the conversations on social media and in your email and in your sales? It's just such a powerful way. So make sure you check out next week. And if you didn't catch last week's on controlling the crowd, make sure you check that one out also.